welcome to the African Diaspora News channel. I'm your host, Rae Kembabazi from Kampala, Uganda. Today we're going to look at the story of a US missionary that came to Uganda and opened up a children's center for treating malnourished children, but she had no medical training, medical experience in any way. She has never or had never been a doctor, but for some reason had the confidence to open this center and run it as a medical facility. Over the time, 105 children died in her medical facility or after receiving treatment from her medical facility, but those are the only ones documented, so many more could have died. So a lawsuit was brought against her and her medical facility by a civil rights organization in Uganda, but the sad story or the sad part is that the lawyers of her organization, which was called Serving His Children, and the lawyers of the two women or the parents who had lost children agreed to settle this matter out of court. After a very, very long time, they decided to drop the case and just get on a table and agree to be paid and agreed to pay the mothers a certain amount of money. So that's why the story is coming up right now. So Renee Bach, who was being sued by two mothers, and an agreement reached this week, agreed to pay $9,500 to each of the mothers of the children with no admission of liability. Prima Kwagala, a Ugandan civil rights attorney whose firm filed the suit on behalf of the women last year in January in 2019, said that the settlement was in line with typical court judgments for medical malpractice death cases in Uganda, and it had brought her clients a measure of closure, some sort of closure. There is no amount of money that can bring these kids back to life, definitely. That's what the attorney of the mothers said, the ones who lost their children, and also added that the women live in extremely poor villages that are very remote, and the court procedure was proving to be logistically and emotionally draining because they had to travel a very long distances with poor means of transport as well. And each time they came to court and revised the story, they would just be crying because they had lost their babies and they would be reminded of their babies. Of course, a Bach has only been talking through her lawyers, and she said that the settlement was deemed by all parties to be in best interests of everyone involved, and also added that this charity organization or her charity organization is finally shutting down, which is a good thing, definitely. Bach founded this charity called Serving the Children more than a decade ago, shortly after completing her high school education in Virginia, and moved to Uganda in the city of Jinja. She began taking in severely malnourished children with extra serious diseases, like dehydration, swelling, respiratory infections, and all that. Her center was unlicensed and also did not employ any single doctor. Over a period of 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, Bach says that her center took in 940 children, and of those 105 died. You can imagine, that's a rate that is above 11% deaths of these kids. In 2015, the authorities shut down the center for operating without a required license, but a few years later reopened it again with a direct partnership to a health center in a nearby district. At that point, they agreed that Bach would not be involved in medical care, which would imply that she would make referrals to the nearby health center. So Renee Bach says she felt inspired to come to Uganda, apparently because she thought it was a calling from God. She had this thing that God had called her to come to Uganda and save Ugandan kids who are sick. Kids with very many illnesses such as pneumonia, intestinal parasites, tuberculosis, stage 4 HIV, dehydration, swelling, all came to her center and she treated them. Yet this was actually not a hospital, and almost every week a child would die. Renee would do medical procedures like running a tube into a child for blood transfusion or inserting an IV, among others. She also used to use a YouTube and Google for reference in very many times. This story is very sad because very many kids lost their lives But I would also like to shed some light on some of the things that may actually baffle you, like how did this happen, how did this happen. So one thing you have to know about Uganda are very many villages or very many districts are short of health facilities. The number of people, the number of patients in comparison to the number of healthcare professionals or health centers available are very, very few. So if people hear there is anyone offering some sort of service, and remember her facility was not charging, I believe, because she used to get funding from maybe friends back home, used to support this charity that she had. Very many people are going to come to get this service because healthcare services are very, very scarce and very, very limited. There is always a pressure at the health centers. People make lines, so that is the reason why her facility kept operating for a very long time, even when she had no license or certificate to operate it. But I would also like to help you understand that there is a possibility that if she had an agreement with the district officials or local authorities, her facility could actually go on operating. If she told them, oh, I'm going to hire a nurse, I hired some nurses, they are helping me, they'll be like, oh, okay, if you did that, then it's okay. Like, the system is not very strong, and no one is always there to keep an eye. So I see why this could have run for a very long time, even when it was unlicensed. And then at one point it was shut down, but later reopened, and they told her to work with a certain health center in a different district, meaning the district where she was operating, or the specific area where she was operating, was short of health facilities, and that would imply that her facility keeps operating but makes referrals to the health center. So if people see the facility operating, trust me, they'll just keep coming because they do not have very many alternatives. So it's also important to note that the current government of Uganda under President Museveni has been way too open or way too receptive to foreigners, and it has just become too much, to the extent that people come and say, you know what, I'm an investor, I'm coming to Uganda, I'm going to do this huge company, provide jobs for local people. As long as you say you are an investor, the government is going to allow you to enter the country. Coming into Uganda is very, very easy. You just buy your ticket, reach Entebbe, buy your visa, pay $100, and you can be in Uganda for 3 months, and then you can just keep renewing it. So it is very, very easy for anyone to enter the country. So because of that, we have very many foreigners in the country. They could be Asian, Indians, Chinese, Europeans, Americans, quite many, who are just in Uganda. They might not even be doing anything there. And also, I do think, this is just a personal opinion, sometimes people come to Uganda, or maybe even Africa at large, with a mentality of, oh my God, I'm going to save Africa, I'm going to save the kids, I'm going to do this for them, I'm going to do this for them. For some reason, they tend to think that they know what's good for Africans more than the Africans themselves, So when I was reading about this story, Renee mentioned that she had a blog where she used to blog maybe every week or every month, writing about her experiences at the her experiences at the center that she was running. So she would keep updating her friends and family back home, like, oh, I did this procedure this week, I treated this kid, can you imagine, I did this and did that. So she wanted to look like, you know what, I'm here, I'm saving these African kids, I'm doing this and this for them. So I don't know if she was trying to play some sort of hero, but she ended up doing more damage than the good, because they say 105 children died, but those are the numbers that we only know, so many, many more could have died. So I believe that very many foreigners, just because they are coming from a more developed country, want to come to Africa and think they know what's best for us more than ourselves, which beats my understanding because, one, they do not know the culture, the African culture. They do not know our traditions, how we've grown up, how we are raised, the way we believe things, the way we see life. They do not know how we are educated. They do not know our language even. So they have never been to Africa or to even any African country. But for some reason they feel they know what is best for us more than ourselves, which I really don't understand. So I feel sometimes, I can't say her intentions were negative, they could have been positive, I do not know, because she was also getting quite some money for the charity she was doing. But I feel she came like, I'm a savior, I'm going to save these kids, She was only 19 years old. Imagine a 19-year-old girl, white girl coming from the US to Uganda. She has never had any African black experience, but for some reason she's very confident that she can come and treat these malnourished kids, So I feel foreigners just come with that kind of perception, which is very wrong, because if you are not African, then you don't know what is good for Africans more than they know for themselves. It's just how it is, because you don't know who they are. Apart from what you watch on TV, of which most of it is biased, majority of these people do not know what is good for Africa, and they have at very, very many times done more harm than good. This is just a representation of the many, but actually there are very, very many stories out there which are similar as to that of Renee. So according to the story, they decided to settle this matter out of court, meaning the lawyers from both sides came to the table, came to an agreement, and dropped the case and said, you know what, we are going to pay these ladies $9,500, it was around that amount, and we dropped this case. So my first impression, I was like, oh my god, like they should have been patient enough to wait for a court ruling. So I'm going to give you reasons, or to help you understand why that happened. One, court procedures in Uganda can take a very, very long. I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but we have very, very few judges, so it can take up to 2, 3, 4 years, before someone gets justice, before you get a judge hearing, before you get to a judge to listen to your case. And remember, these are ladies who do not stay in Kampala, which is the capital. They have to travel each and every time to go to Kampala, to the capital, to have their case listened to. They have to incur transport. They do not even have a car to ease the transport. They have to get a taxi or a bus or, a motorcycle, a very, very many different means. So that can be very tiresome, very hectic. And imagine doing that for a very long time. These are ladies from the village who do not have a lot of money, So it can be a very, very hectic, And the lawyers as well, I think the lawyers also just want to get money, settle this. They feel the kids are already dead, so, what else are you going to do, So they just decide to settle this and also get their share of the money and call it a day. So I believe that's what usually happens with very many cases in Uganda. At the end of the day, justice is not served because it is a very lengthy procedure and very costly procedure, and many Ugandans do not afford it in most of the times, And when the lawyer helps you and takes on your case, the lawyer is going to advise the client, to influence the client to be like, you know what, let's agree and settle this and you get paid. After all, you don't even have this money. There is nowhere you'll ever make this money, because $9,500 for a village lady is a lot of money. There is nowhere they'll ever make that money from in the first place. So they will convince the client to drop the case, settle. Everyone gets their little share, and you know what? Call it a day. So that's what usually happens. But I'd also like to say that the system is quite weak in Uganda. The laws are weak. They can easily be penetrated. They can easily be broken through. As long as someone has money, you pay this person, pay this person, pay this person, and you get away with whatever crime you've committed. So that's also important to note. In conclusion, there is another organization in Uganda called No White Saviors. It's going to bring or open up many more cases against serving his children and Renee Bach, because actually very many families lost their children. So this is going to be a continuing story. It is not yet over. I'll keep updating you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Follow me on my social media pages at Rae Kembabazi, and also follow me or subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's called Hot Stories UG. Thank you and see you on the next story. Bye.